So welcome everybody. I'm here with Dr. Balázs Molnár from Hungary, and it's very good to speak to you today, Balázs.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me.
So for those of our viewers who aren't maybe familiar with you, could you maybe introduce yourself and in what capacity you are interested in the topic we're going to be discussing today, which is declining demographics in Europe and how Hungary in particular is attempting to reverse some of these demographic trends?
Certainly. Well, I'm Balázs Molnár. I'm the Vice President of the Maria Kopp Institute for Demography and Families. We are a background institute of the Hungarian government dealing with population affairs, demography, and family policies. I am a lawyer, I'm a diplomat. I served in several posts in Brussels and Vienna. And I'm a father and I have 3 children. So our professional interest comes from underpinning the Hungarian family policy, which is one of the most known or well-known policies of the Hungarian government, which is now in place for 12 years.
I hear that this year several new policies have been brought in to promote the growth of families, to encourage young people in particular to have bigger families, more children. And famously, I believe several years ago, the Hungarian government made headlines by offering zero income tax for life if a woman has 4 or more children, which is it's radical in the sense that it's not being done by anyone else. You know, you don't really hear these kinds of policies coming out of France or Germany or anywhere else like that. And now I think if I'm correct, excuse me, I believe this year, if you have just one child but you're under the age of 30, you'll have no income tax for life. What is some of the thought process behind these policies?
Let me start a bit further back because I believe it's very important to see why demographic processes and demographic phenomena is so important to the government. Well, first of all, Hungary has a shrinking, declining population since 1981. Since then, our population decreased by 1 million. You may be aware that the Hungarian government is not seeing the solution in mass immigration to Hungary, but rather in helping Hungarians to have as many children as they would like to have. But there we are lucky because an average Hungarian still, we did a research last year, would like to have more than two, by far more than 2 children. Our last digit is 2.37, which is a representative study among those who are still in the childbearing ages. So actually, the aim and the task of the government in that sense is to help Hungarians to have as many children as they would like to have. So no one is trying to convince anyone in Hungary who does not want children to have children or to have more children than they would desire. On the other hand, we have some specificities because when we look into the composition of the Hungarian population, we can see that between 2010 and 2022, we have roughly 300,000 less women in childbearing ages. So we practically would like to do a miracle here. We would like to have less women have more children than previously. Hungary is a 10 million country. We are at 9.7 million population. So in that sense, a shrinking population is maybe more of a threat to an Ireland-sized country, to a Hungary-sized country, than to a country of Germany or the United States. So in that sense, just that, so much for why this is such a pressing, such an important issue. So the aim is to help Hungarian families to have all the children they would like to have, and several measures have been introduced to them since 2010. Stability is a key point here. Hungarian families and families in general have to believe that those measures which are introduced will be available for them throughout the 2 decades at least when they are raising the children. Here in Hungary, we had big problems that austerity measures before 2010, introduced by the left-wing liberal governments, hit families very hard. And that time, when we had a peak of women in their childbearing ages, we had the record low fertility in Hungary. That time, the so-called total fertility figure, which tells us how many children average women have, was at the record low of 1.23. That means that 100 women only got 123 children, and that was that time the lowest in the European Union. Now we are at 1.59, so we have a 27% increase in the last 12 years, which in that sense is quite interesting and of course quite positive. And no one in the European Union managed to increase fertility as much as we did in the last 12 years. On the other hand, there are so many factors which influences the number of children a family is able to welcome. If we ask Hungarians about which are the three most determining factors when deciding upon how many children they would like to have, on the first place is a partnership, so practically a marriage, cohabitation. On the second is a stable employment, and on the third place we already have a proper family home. In the case of Hungarians and Eastern Europeans or Central Europeans as we are, it means owning a home. So the Hungarians and Central Europeans would not like to rent, but rather to own a home. So in that sense, we already have some of the key places where we would like to interfere. And then maybe just a couple of words about the new measures and the flagship of these pro-family policies. And I see that you already have some questions. Please interrupt me in a minute. So on the flagship is the family taxation, which is a very just taxation, so to say, because working parents are able to reduce their income tax according to how many children they have. They can already do so if they have one child. If they have two children, we already pay 2 times more after a child. And if you have 3 children, then it's already 330 euros a month. You have to pay less taxes, personal income taxes. And where the Hungarian system is quite unique, you mentioned yourself, there is one help, so to say, towards those who raised more than 4 children, so 4 or more children. And of course, they spent a lot of time out of the workforce because they were home with their children. So that any mother who raised 4 children whenever in their life will be exempted from paying any personal income tax throughout their careers. Personal income tax is flat rate in Hungary, it's 15% for all. So this is already 15% more income, and this goes until they are active. And then there are 2 new measures. Actually, only our Polish friends did take that into account and copied, so to say, or took over the Hungarian example. No other country uses this incentive of channeling those who have a lot of children towards the employment, towards the labor market. It actually benefits roughly 50,000 Hungarian women, Hungarian mothers. So if you look at the budgetary input, it's not a big deal. On the other hand, it is, we believe, a very nice recognition of motherhood and the recognition that motherhood and raising children, rearing children is beneficial to the society per se. And then we have 2 new measures. One started last year. Everyone who is under the age of 25 is exempted to pay personal income taxes until they reach the age 25. So it's not lifelong. And this only concerns until average income. There's no limit in the case of the four children mothers. This one goes until the average income. Still a huge help. It helps young people under 25. Roughly 350,000 Hungarians benefit from them. That, and of course, it helps them to start their individual life, maybe start family, maybe look at home creation or employment, etc. And then the newest measure, started as of January the 1st, it means that in case you are a woman and you have a child before you turn 30, you will be exempted from paying personal income tax, again, until the average income level. And that will run out when you turn, in that year when you turn 30. So again, this is not lifelong, but there we would like to have help families to start having babies at an earlier age, because this is prolongation, so to say, of the childbirth is one of the determining factor on how many siblings there will be. If you start in your mid-30s, you might want 3, 4, 5 children. Biology will certainly have its say as well. So this we believe will help young Hungarians to start their families a couple of years earlier, Now the average age of women having their first children in Hungary is 29 years of age.
That's remarkable, and one of the things that I find most fascinating about the tax break kind of framework is that rather than offering people money from the state, which carries with it kind of a potential moral hazard where people might who aren't necessarily able to support a large family might want to have a large family to avail of some kind of government support, and then you run into all kinds of problems there potentially by just telling people you're allowed to keep 100% of what you earn. I think that's much more sustainable from a state perspective. So I think it's impressive the way it's kind of been concocted there. I suppose one of the questions that occurred to me when you were talking about all the various factors that play into a couple's decision to have a child, one of them being marriage, of course, and having a home. Religiosity, I assume, will also contribute to that. What's the religious lay of the land as far as Hungary goes in terms of the general population? Generally speaking, of course, no country is black and white.
Well, it's it was one of the key importance of the policy started in 2010 that we attach family policies to legitimate employment, and we break from the toxic relationship between family policies and anti-poverty policies. So just because you are rearing a children, you should not be treated as poor. But of course, it also means that if you have children, and even if you have a large family, it should not mean that you are affected by poorness and deprivation in a larger manner than if you would not have decided to have those children. So it was very important. Also, we believe that there is a very good link between activation, legitimate employment, and making actually the population interested in engaging themselves in legitimate employment. We have a very good figures in how many Hungarians are actually in employment. We've been the fourth from the last in 2010 when it comes to activation, when it comes to employment, and now we are seventh from the top, and now we have the fourth lowest unemployment figure in the European Union. So we have in a country of 9.7 million, more than 1 million more in employment than in 2010. So this is again something where we have managed, or the government managed to have quite some positive results. On the religiosity, it's Hungary is divided on a sense that we are roughly 70% Roman Catholic, 30% Protestant. On how actually how much or how religious the people actually in their everyday life is, it's not easy to say, but this is roughly what comes out of our figures. 40 years of communist impression was quite heavy on religiosity and the standing of the church. Unfortunately, in this country. But what we can say is that for 12 years now, we have a Christian democratic government, and the relations with the historic churches is very important and very good. And also they are engaged in many activities similar to Ireland, to schooling, to crashes, even to kindergartens, hospitals, and so on. So they are a very important part of the fabric of the society again. So I believe that's the division of Catholic Protestant is there, but it's not a problematic relation at all.
You alluded earlier to the fact that Hungary's approach to this problem is distinct from many other European countries, Ireland included, in that the kind of default European answer to declining birth rates is mass immigration, and the fact that the idea is you bring in younger people from other parts of the world, and that will kind of shore up the holes in your demography. And Hungary has taken quite a strong stance against that and said, no, we're going to go in a very different direction. What do you think is the problem with doing it the way other European countries are doing it as far as the immigration approach?
Well, what we certainly know is that Hungary has a different history than many other Western European countries. In that sense, we, for example, never had any colonies elsewhere in the world. So Hungary, in that sense, thereby being a very mixed population from all the countries around Hungary, we have a large German ethnic Hungarians with German roots, with Romanians, Slovakians, Croatians, and so on. Even my family is full of other Central European nations. On the other hand, we did not experience that big migratory inflow characteristic for Western Europe since the 60s, 70s onwards. So in that sense, if you walk around in Budapest, you do not necessarily experience exactly the same metropolitan feeling as you experience in Western European streets. On the other hand, there are certainly some issues when it comes to mass immigration. Mass immigration brings along quite some societal issues as well, parallel societies and so on. This is something which Hungary does not face at this point, and we would also like to avoid going down the path that we believe that mass immigration would be some sort of an easy medicine on addressing demographic shortcomings. We have demographic challenges ourselves. We are an aging society, as practically all European countries. On the other hand, we believe that we can solve this issue, or we can at least mitigate this issue by having as many Hungarians babies born as only possible. So it's not against someone and something, but it is for the Hungarian families.
It seems like many countries are not entirely clued into how serious this problem might be, and I'll only refer to Ireland because it's the country I know best, being the one I'm from. The fact that just several years ago, the government here in this country had a significant push to legalize abortion, which they succeeded in doing, and so now Ireland has legalized abortion and some quite liberal laws in that area. And regardless of what one thinks about that issue in particular, whether they're socially liberal or conservative or whatever, that's a side issue. It kind of stands to reason that policies like that probably aren't going to help make this problem any easier if we're literally eliminating future generations of Irish workers and so on in the womb. What impact do you think? Economic impact, putting aside all the social effects and so on, what economic impact do you think having a declining birth rate could have on a country long term, say in 50 years?
Well, this is obvious. If you will not have the next generation, you will not be able to support your social security schemes. You will not have very well trained workforce. All the examples from other regions of the world does not necessarily support that with this mass migratory inflow, this problem can be solved. We see that there is a big brain drain from Eastern and Central European countries towards Western Europe because the high-tech economies of their countries is not necessarily supported enough by mass immigration, for example, from third countries. So this is something where even if we do not mention the damages or the threats to the societal fabric of the country, for example, how an Irish, a Hungarian, a German treats gender equality, for example, the role of women in society. This is something which is very different among most of those who are now entering the European Union countries, because they are used to something, very different culture. So in that sense, if we would like to preserve the Judeo-Christian heritage of Europe, which we are very much interested in, which is not a religious question, it's a cultural question, then you certainly would like to stand up for your own culture and your own habits and your own traditions. And this can only be safeguarded if you maintain your own population. And of course, we should not forget that there is a characteristic. An Irish is not the same as a British is not the same as a German is not the same as the Hungarian. So if you would like to have the diversity in that sense among the European nations, we would not like to be solved in some sort of a melting pot, being exactly the same, diluted to the same federalistic European whatever. So in that sense, this is something where we certainly would like to preserve Hungary to be as Hungarian as only possible. It does not mean that we would not be open to know as much as only possible about anyone else around us, and that we would not be aware of very critical situations in countries where mass migration starts. Hungary does a lot, for example, to help those third world countries that their youth, their most valuable and most well-trained people would not need to go on very dangerous journeys towards Europe, but to help them there directly. And of course, we have quite some programs on for helping persecuted Christians, for example, in Iraq or in Africa, but also helping not just Christians and anyone, but in the countries of origin, so to say, in their homeland. So let us help them to stay home, give them some hope there, give them economic prosperity there. We are not helping by inviting everyone over to Europe, because there we will not be able to help them. And if I may come back to you with just a couple of words about abortion policies, because we have a constitution. The constitution was adopted in 2011, and the constitution says that we are protecting the life from the conception onwards, which is mirrored in the Hungarian family policies, and most Hungarian family support measures are available to families already after the 12th week of the pregnancy. So it's the still unborn baby is treated similarly as a born child, which is of course a nice help to families who are accepting, for example, a first child, and you have a lot of things that you have to purchase before the baby is born, and the financial help, for example, the tax incentive or the tax cut is already available 6 months before the baby is born. But for example, if we look into the Hungarian abortion numbers, we have a relatively liberal abortion policy in Hungary in place. The crisis situation of the mother is the key. In case there is, and the crisis can be an economic nature as well. So it's not necessarily very hard to get abortion in Hungary, but still we see that we have roughly 40% reduction in the last 12 years in the number of abortions. But in the 60s and 70s, we had many years when we had twice as many abortions in Hungary than live births. So we would not face half of our demographic problems if at least some of those babies would not have been aborted in the 60s, 70s. So we are a country who was, during the communist time in particular, was very hardly hit by record high numbers of abortions, similar to other Eastern European countries, by the way. And this is something which we still carry with us. So that is exactly why we believe that, despite the fact that the government did not restrict the access to abortion, and it does not plan to do so, on the other hand, many of the pro-life and pro-family measures have been introduced into the system, which actually makes the crisis situation of the mother be maybe less of an issue if we already look at only at the financial incentives, for example, or other possibilities. Adoption and so on, the numbers can be reduced without actually legally prohibiting abortions.
I suppose I don't want to keep you too long. I'm sure you're a very busy man, but as a final question, if you had to send a message to the other nations of Europe as to how they should tackle this problem, what would your advice be to a country like Ireland or Germany or France or anywhere else?
Well, our understanding is that we can only submit some best practices, and everyone has to decide for their own characteristics and national systems and traditions, because I believe it's very important that we do not think that we know better than anyone else. On the other hand, we believe that the social recognition of motherhood and fatherhood and child rearing is something which had been very heavily damaged in Europe in the last decade in particular. So we are working a lot in restoring the social recognition of motherhood and parenthood and child rearing. So there, I believe this is a key issue. We are convinced that whereby you have to help less advantaged families and poor families in particular, we should not mix family policies with anti-poverty measures, because just because someone is middle class or even upper middle class, it would still have a lot of expenses when it comes to the education of children and so on. So this is something where we also have to help them, especially as we all know that fertility is a U graph. So it's a very poor have a lot of children, and the very rich have a lot of children, whereby the middle class has a big deficit or a big difference between born children and actually wished for children. So it is something where we believe that legitimate employment, stability, recognition of motherhood, and of course addressing poverty measures, addressing poverty in general and child poverty. We do not believe that there is child poverty. There is only poverty of families. And then if we do for something for employment, then the poverty of families will be reduced significantly. We see very promising figures there. And of course, we, as a last notion from us here, we believe that it should be up to the families to decide. So there's a big autonomy is granted in Hungary to families, to mothers in particular, to decide how long they would like to stay home with a baby. They can stay home in Hungary until 3 years of age of the child if they wish so, but they can also return to the employment after the child turns 6 months of age. And they can keep, in Hungary, they can keep the benefit. It is an 810 euro benefit a month. They can keep that until the child turns 2, and they can go back to work employment without any limitation. This is a new measure. Again, so the decision is at the hands of the families, and we have had 80% crash places more than in 2010. So the government helps where it can, but on the other hand, leaves the decision with the families, because you can also see that this is a very good, so to say, investment into your own children, your own family. If you stay home as a mother or a father, 4 years maybe with 2 children, 6 maybe with 3 children, and then we will work until we are 70 if we are lucky enough to live that long. So the career can come later. And as you see, there are some measures which support those who give birth at an earlier stage. And also we can, for example, as introduced in January, we are eliminating outstanding student loans to mothers who give birth prior their 30th birthday, during their tertiary studies, or 2 years after their tertiary studies. So again, something where we can give the message that being a very well-built, well-educated woman and motherhood it should not exclude each other.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Balázs. It was great
talking
to you.
Very much. It was my pleasure.